You have been in the back of an Uber. Maybe you took one this week. At the end of the ride, the app showed you a number. Let us say $24. You looked at it, you closed the app, and you never thought about it again. The driver did not get $24. In some cities, in some months of this year, they got less than half of it. And out of that half, they paid for the gasoline, the insurance, the tires, the brakes, and the slow, quiet loss of the only real asset they own. There is a number that decides whether that ride made them money or cost them money. It is not the fare. It is not the tip. It is not the surge. It is 76 cents. That is what the United States government currently estimates it costs to drive 1 mile in your own car. Not the fuel, everything. This is the story of the 76-cent line, the reason almost nobody driving today does the math against it, and why in July of this year, the government moved that line higher in the middle of the tax year, which it almost never does. Start with why anyone signs up, because the offer is genuinely good. Your car is already sitting outside. Your phone can find the passengers. There is no interview, no fixed shift, and nobody asking why you arrived 7 minutes late. You open the app when you need money, you drive, you go home, and on the right night, it works exactly like that. The city is busy, requests arrive one after another, a surge lights up as a concert lets out. 8 hours later, the phone says about $175, which sits right around the median for a full shift. That number looks like pay. It is revenue. An employee can look at an hourly wage and understand roughly what an hour of work produced. A driver has to wait until the car has taken its share. Most people think an Uber driver sells their time. That is not quite right. Time is how the job feels. Time is what you lose. But time is not the product. A regular job pays you for hours. A driver is paid for distance. Every dollar that arrives is attached to a mile that was driven, and every mile that was driven took something out of a machine that cost tens of thousands of dollars and will one day be worth nothing. So the driver is not renting out their afternoon. They are selling their car 1 mile at a time in pieces small enough that nobody notices the car leaving. Fuel takes the first visible piece. The rest leaves quietly. Tires lose tread. Brake pads thin out. The oil ages. The odometer climbs and the resale value falls with it. None of that ever appears as a deduction on the earnings screen. The app counts completed trips. The driver lives through every mile between them. Somebody needed to put a price on a mile, and it turns out one already exists. The measurement is almost comically simple. Every year, the IRS runs a study on what it actually costs to operate a car in the United States. Not just fuel, oil, tires, maintenance, repairs, insurance, registration, depreciation, lease payments, fixed costs and variable costs together. Then it averages all of it into a single number, cents per mile. That number exists so self-employed people can deduct their driving. But it is also the closest thing that exists to an official price tag on 1 mile of your own car. For 2026, it started at 72.5 cents. Then on the 1st of July, the IRS raised it to 76 in the middle of the year because of fuel prices. Mid-year revisions are rare. They happen when the original number stops matching reality fast enough to matter. And if you suspect one government agency of exaggerating, check it against something completely separate. The American Automobile Association runs its own annual study. Their most recent figure for owning and operating a new vehicle is $11,577 a year, based on 15,000 miles. Divide one by the other, and you get about 77 cents a mile. Two organizations, different methods, no shared interest, landing within a penny of each other, so that is the line. Below it, the mile paid for itself. Above it, the mile was charity. Now what a mile actually pays. Here the data is unusually good because drivers track themselves. Gridwise collects earnings from hundreds of thousands of gig workers. Across nearly 67,000 Uber drivers, median trip pay came out at $21.18 an hour. Add tips, surge, and promotions, and the median gross rises to $21.92. The top 10% clear $29.28. Read that fast and it sounds fine. Better than plenty of jobs that require a degree. Then the expenses arrive. By Gridwise's own accounting, after fuel, maintenance, and insurance, most drivers land between $15 and $18 an hour. Run it as a real week. 30 hours at the median is about $635 gross. Subtract driving costs and self-employment tax, and you keep somewhere around $420 to $445. That is roughly $14 to $15 an hour. Same car, same city, same driver. The number lost about a third of itself on the way to the bank, and almost nobody notices. because the money that leaves does not leave all at once. It leaves in small pieces, at a gas station, at a tire shop, at a mechanic, months apart, and never once inside the app where the earnings are counted. Now walk through an ordinary ride, because this is where the 76 cents starts to bite. A request comes in while the driver is parked 3 miles from the passenger. They drive over. 2 more minutes pass at the curb before anybody opens the door. The trip itself is 8 miles. It ends in a quiet residential street 12 minutes from anywhere busy, so they drive back out. Add it up. 3 miles to get there. 8 miles paid. Several more to return to demand. Only one part of that had somebody in the back seat. The car absorbed all of it. That distance outside a paying ride is the unpaid mile. It might be the pickup. It might be the empty return from the airport. It might be a slow loop through downtown while the app looks for someone nearby, or the drive home at 2 in the morning with the app switched off. Every one of those miles costs exactly the same as a paid one. Same fuel, same tires, same wear, same depreciation. They simply do not pay. The 76-cent figure, it turns out, was actually the optimistic version. Research on rideshare traffic has repeatedly put empty miles at somewhere around 40% of total miles driven. So if only about 6 out of every 10 miles are earning, the real cost carried by each paid mile is not 76 cents. It is closer to $1.26. The line the driver actually has to beat is nearly double the printed one. And it is invisible, because no app in this business shows you your empty miles as a cost. They are not hidden exactly. They are just never added up anywhere the driver can see. The car decides more of this outcome than almost anything the driver does. Somebody driving a paid-off, fuel-efficient sedan is running a completely different business from somebody making a $400 monthly payment, and a different one again from somebody renting by the week. 3 drivers can complete identical trips and keep wildly different amounts. For drivers without a suitable car, Uber advertises weekly rentals through partners like Hertz. Basic options start around $240 a week before taxes, fuel and extras. The appeal is obvious. Maintenance is usually included, the mileage allowance is generous, and you can start driving without buying a vehicle. But it changes the psychology of the entire job. An owner who has a bad week can leave the car parked and lose almost nothing extra. A renter starts Monday already owing the weekly rate. Before a single dollar goes toward rent or groceries, several hours of driving have to buy the right to keep driving. And $240 a week is more than $12,000 a year before tax, before fuel, before anything. Larger vehicles cost considerably more. The app can be switched off. The rental clock cannot. Then there is insurance, which is boring right up until the moment it is the only thing that matters. A personal auto policy may not cover commercial rideshare activity. Uber carries its own coverage, but what applies depends on which state you are in and which phase you are in, waiting for a request, driving to the pickup, or carrying a passenger. Some drivers pay extra for a rideshare endorsement to close the gap. That distinction sounds academic until a crash happens between trips. At that point, the question is not what the driver earned that evening. It is which policy applies while a damaged car earns nothing at all. Now, the part that has genuinely changed in the last few years. The average rideshare fare in the United States is now around $23.66, after prices rose close to 10% in a single year. Over the same period, gross driver pay per hour rose about 4%. The ride got more expensive. The driving did not get proportionally better paid. So how much of a fare actually reaches the driver? Uber's own published answer is that they kept about 21% of each fare on average in the third quarter of 2025. Independent analysis says something very different. Len Sherman, a professor at Columbia Business School who has tracked this for years, published work in June of this year, finding that in some cities the take rate has now passed 50%. Uber disputes his numbers and has done so every time he publishes. The most convincing evidence comes from neither side. It comes from screenshots. A 2025 report built directly from driver receipts documented one trip where the passenger was charged $72.75 and the driver was paid $24.82. That is 66% taken on a single ride. Another showed a $48 fare against a driver payment of just under $16. And there is a specific mechanism that made this possible. It used to be that driver pay was a fixed share of the fare. Bigger fare, bigger payout. Then upfront pricing arrived, and the price quoted to the rider and the offer sent to the driver became 2 separate calculations, produced by two different systems that no longer have to move together. Uber's own documentation describes the service fee as either a set percentage in some markets or simply the difference between the two numbers in others. The driver ends up as the only person in the transaction who doesn't actually know what the transaction was worth. That asymmetry shows up everywhere in the actual work. A driver chooses when to log in. The app chooses what appears next. It knows where demand is building, how many drivers are within a mile, and what price a passenger will accept. The person behind the wheel sees one request and a countdown of a few seconds. Decline a bad trip, and you protect your margin but earn nothing. Accept it, and you might land in a busy district, or you might end up 25 minutes from anywhere. Nobody knows until it is over. A large part of this job is making financial decisions with missing information while traffic keeps moving. Surge makes it obvious. A bright patch appears on the map and pulls drivers across town. By the time they get there, the surge is gone, because everybody else saw the same signal. The map was not lying. It just changed faster than a car can travel. Airports turn the whole thing into a waiting game. You join a queue with 40 cars ahead of you. Leaving wastes the drive over. Staying might produce a long, valuable ride, or 50 quiet minutes followed by a $6 hop to an airport hotel. From outside, that lot looks like nothing is happening. Inside every car, time is being spent. Some have the engine running for air conditioning. Some paid a toll to get in. Experienced drivers learn the flight schedules and skip queues that are too long. New drivers see the airport as guaranteed demand. It is demand. It is just demand divided among everybody who had the same idea. This is also why two honest people can quote completely different hourly figures. Uber tends to discuss earnings during engaged time when a driver is actively on a trip. Independent studies usually count everything from logging in to logging out. Somebody paying rent cares about the second clock. Taxes run on that second clock too. Most US drivers are independent contractors, so nothing is withheld. They track their own expenses, report their own income, and often owe estimated payments through the year. Net self-employment earnings above $400 can create a filing obligation on their own. Deductions genuinely help, but a deduction is not a refund. If a tire costs $200, writing it off lowers taxable income by $200. The tire is still gone, and the driver still paid for it. And then there is the account itself, which is the strangest asset in this whole arrangement because the driver does not own it. Passengers rate drivers, and the average sits behind every interaction. A low rating, an expired document, a failed identity check, or one serious complaint can restrict access to the platform. There is a review process. An appeal does not generate income while the account is offline. This changes what service work feels like. An employee with a difficult customer can explain it to a supervisor who knows the workplace. A driver gets a 1-star rating after a disagreement and frequently never learns what was said. Most complaints do not end a driving career. Documents get updated, false reports get reviewed, and the platform says permanent removals are rare. But the shape of the risk is worth stating plainly. The driver owns the car, pays for the fuel, carries the insurance, and absorbs every operating cost, while access to customers sits in an account controlled by someone else. The job also asks for work that nothing pays for. The car needs cleaning. Somebody eats in the back seat. Somebody leaves a smell that outlasts the trip. There is no break room, no protected lunch, no colleague nearby when a passenger turns aggressive, and bathroom access depends on finding a business willing to let you in. Safety is not abstract from the driver's seat. You are letting strangers into a small enclosed space, often late at night, while concentrating on traffic. The passenger sees your name, your photo, your car, and your plate before they get in. You see far less about them. Uber has emergency tools, trip sharing, background checks, and published safety reports, and those things help. They cannot put a coworker in the passenger seat during an argument. Fatigue is the quieter version of the same problem. The best paying hours are late nights and weekends, which is exactly when the body wants to stop. One more trip raises the total on the phone and lowers reaction time at the same moment. The financial incentive and the safety decision point in opposite directions, and only one of them shows up on the earnings screen. But the biggest cost in this entire job is the one that never sends an invoice. In the AAA breakdown, depreciation is the single largest expense of owning a car. $4,334 a year, which works out to roughly 29 cents of every mile. Fuel, for comparison, is about 13. Finance charges add another 7.5 cents per mile, for anyone still paying off the vehicle. So the most expensive part of driving is not the thing you pay for at the pump. It is the thing you pay for later. And the arithmetic turns specifically against full-time drivers. The AAA model assumes 15,000 miles a year in a 5-year, 75,000 mile life. A full-time rideshare driver can put 40 to 50,000 miles on a car in 12 months. They reach the end of that 5-year model in under 2 years. The gasoline gets paid on Tuesday. The insurance gets paid monthly. But the largest cost of the whole operation gets paid exactly once. Years later, on the afternoon you try to sell the car and find out what 40,000 rideshare miles did to it. That delay is not a detail. It is the reason this business model works at all. The income is immediate and visible. The main cost is delayed and invisible. Almost every driver who quits saying the numbers stop making sense is describing the moment those two things finally met. None of this makes driving a mistake for everyone. That would be lazy, and it would be wrong. If you already own a car, if it is already losing value in your driveway, whether you use it or not, and you drive a busy Friday night in a dense city for a few extra $100, the arithmetic can genuinely work. You are selling capacity you are going to waste. A parent can work while a child is at school. A student can drive between classes. Somebody between jobs can turn a free weekend into grocery money without waiting on a hiring process. For those drivers, Uber does not need to replace a salary. It only needs to convert dead hours into cash, and that is a much easier target to hit. The person this damages is the one who did the opposite, who decided this was going to be the job, who bought or financed or leased a car specifically in order to drive it. Because now the loan payment is part of the cost structure, and a slow week does not pause it. Models of full-time drivers in a city like Los Angeles put annual gross earnings at just under $42,000. Gross. Before fuel, before tires. Before the insurance that costs more once you tell them what the car is for. Before self-employment tax. Before depreciation. And the people in that position are usually not there because they compared spreadsheets. They are there because the barrier to entry was almost zero, the flexibility was real, and nothing else was going to start paying them this week. That last part gets left out of nearly every video about this. The alternative was not a better job. The alternative was waiting. Location changes the answer more than skill does. New York City has used a pay floor for app drivers for years. Some other states and cities have added minimum compensation rules, benefits, or bargaining rights. In most markets, drivers have nothing comparable. And even where a floor exists, the definition of working time decides what it is worth. A guarantee based only on engaged time excludes the minutes spent waiting for a request. An hourly rate that sounds generous still has to cover vehicle costs. An employee would never pay out of pocket. That's the reason arguments about driver pay never resolve into one number. A driver in dense Chicago with 2-minute pickups is not running the same business as someone covering spread out suburbs. Weather, local fuel prices, airport rules, and insurance costs move the result before personal strategy even begins. The drivers who do best treat the app as a tool rather than an employer. They know their cost per mile, they count total online time, including the quiet parts, they refuse trips that strand them. They learn when their city is actually busy instead of when it feels busy. And they stop when the numbers stop working, which is the hardest habit of all, because the app is designed to make stopping feel like leaving money behind. This argument is also older than most people think, and it is worth being honest about the part that got it wrong. In 2018, researchers at MIT published a study concluding that the median rideshare driver earned a profit of about $8.55 an hour before taxes, and that 74% were earning below their state minimum wage. It caused an enormous fight. Uber disputed the methodology in public. The authors reworked it, and the revised figure came out meaningfully higher, so the headline number was not right. But the shape of the finding was, and it has never really been overturned. Once you account for the whole cost of the vehicle instead of only the fuel, a large share of this work pays less than it appears to, and some of it pays nothing. 8 years later, with fares up 10%, with take rates disputed anywhere between 21 and 66%, and with the government raising its own cost estimate mid-year, the question has not been settled. It has only become more expensive to get wrong, and there is now one more variable that did not exist in the older versions of this argument. Driverless vehicles are already completing passenger trips in cities including Phoenix, Austin, and Atlanta, in some cases through the same app human drivers use. Uber's position is that autonomous cars grow the overall market and that human drivers stay busy as it expands. Outside data so far is mixed. In several cities with robotaxi service, human drivers completed fewer trips per hour and waited slightly longer between them, although nobody has proven the autonomous cars caused it. Demand and driver supply moved at the same time. But for somebody deciding whether to finance a car for the next 5 years, mixed evidence is still evidence. A part-time driver can walk away the week the economics turn. Somebody with 4 years left on a car loan cannot. The risk is not that human drivers disappear next year. It is that the platform now has a second source of vehicles, while the driver holds a depreciating asset tied to a market that can shift faster than a loan balance. So here is the whole thing in one line. 76 cents is what a mile costs. Roughly 40% of the miles pay nothing. The largest expense in the job does not send its bill until the day you sell the car. And the amount a driver is paid for any given ride is now calculated separately from the amount the passenger pays for it. None of those 4 facts are secret. They are published by the IRS, by AAA, by the drivers themselves, and by Uber. They are simply never in the same place at the same time, and there is exactly one person in this arrangement whose income depends on adding them up. Every other job in the economy has somebody else absorbing the cost of the equipment. The restaurant owns the kitchen, the office owns the computers, the airline owns the plane. Here, the single most expensive piece of equipment in the entire operation is owned by the lowest paid person in it, and it is being consumed at a rate that only becomes visible on a used car listing years from now. Next time you are in the back of one and the ride ends and the app shows you the fare, remember that the number on your screen and the number on theirs are no longer the same number, and that somewhere underneath both of them there is a line at 76 cents a mile. That is the unpaid mile. The passenger never sees it. The app does not put it on the main screen. The driver pays for it anyway.